Hello and welcome to the Michael Mama Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And I'm excited about this podcast. I think the way it unfolded too is, I found it fascinating. And that is that, recently, really over the past year or whatever, I got back into fitness. I ignored it for a while. And I love it. I find it fascinating. Throughout my life, last half of my life, I guess, is when I really got into resistance training, weightlifting, that kind of a thing. And I learned a tremendous amount from it. And also I saw how much it evolved from decade to decade. It's amazing how much it's changed. And, I never really felt like they really had it figured out, and I'm sure they don't even today, but they made huge strides, and I feel great about where it is now. Not the stuff necessarily that you'll see on YouTube or whatever. There's a lot of good stuff there, but I've been working with my own experience, and I've been working with AI quite a bit. And Scotty, it's funny that the AI keeps referring to me as an experienced lifter and stuff like that. I don't see myself that way. Just not my self-image, I guess. But the evolution was interesting because I started doing, and this might sound like I'm talking about fitness and stuff. I'm really not. And so, stay with me here because I think where this leads is wonderful and fantastic. And it's all about Vedic knowledge and human evolution and really the pragmatics, the reality of how to evolve, really. Certainly meditation is always key, and there are these other things, but we'll get into it. So where was I? So I started working on a new exercise, and even that evolved. I went from squats to deadlifts, and then I started doing sumo deadlifts. Sumo deadlifts, if you're familiar with like a horse stance that you'll see in Chinese martial arts like that, where the legs are apart and you ground to the earth, bend your knees, and then the energy, and they talk about microcosmic orbit, and they also talk about how the energy flows up the feet. It meets at the base of the spine or the pelvis, and then goes up right through the Sushumna, it's called in Vedic literature. And I have a whole history of, I used to teach hands-on healing. I stopped doing it because I don't think it's healthy for the practitioner. All that stress and everything that comes out, it just gets on you and your clothes, and I don't think it's healthy, to be honest. I was really good at it though, and I taught people how to feel energy. I used to say that people lost the ability to feel, we feel intense emotions and things like that, but the feeling connects with the ability to feel through your hands, and all that is interconnected. It's not like, okay, I can feel my emotions and therefore I can feel. There's a lot more to it, and one supports the other. You don't really fully have one in a refined state until the other is in a refined state. And emotions in an unrefined state are very, very common. But we're talking about refinement here. So at any rate, I started dabbling in this sumo deadlift. And that's because, regular squats or regular deadlifts, they're kind of hard on the back, the lower back, whereas sumo, it's more of a full body thing. And the more I worked with them, the more I started just being fascinated by how subtle it is. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about any of this energy stuff in relation to this. I was just doing an exercise. But I learned over time that it had a lot to do with, the way you plant your feet and the way you ground into the earth and the way you allow that they don't speak this way as on the fitness YouTubes. There's a woman that I follow. She's fabulous as far as her technique and that goes. What's her name? Natasha Augey, Aughey. If you're interested, type in Natasha Augey sumo deadlifts, and just 1 minute you'll get a feeling. But her form is excellent. I took my computer in the other day, and the guy who's working on the computer, nice guy, he was saying that he does I forget, jujitsu or something. And so he saw that was on there, and he commented on my computer, and so he commented, and I said, yeah, I said, her form is great. And he looked and he said, yeah, it is. And he could tell because how it relates to martial arts, and so what is involved in that? Well, you ground. Bodybuilders or whoever would say that you just, your feet are solidly placed on the earth. And then they'll say when you lift, you push the earth away, which is interesting actually. Whereas energy healers would say you take roots and you plant the roots from your feet down all the way down to the center of the earth. There's two ways of saying the same thing, really, though they may sound very different at first glance. And then what happens is, you'll bend your knees, and that, they'll say that's to integrate everything up your legs and into the back. Energy people would say you bend your knees for the energy to flow. And once you start being able to feel, you realize there's a very real energetic component to all of this. It's not just woo-woo, though people get off on woo-woo tangents with it for sure. At any rate, then you bend your knees, and then it meets at the base of the spine, in the pelvis, the tailbone, like that. And then it goes up through. But before I was into the energy component of it all, I was, from reading and seeing what I see on YouTube or whatever, it's like the tailbone has to be tucked just right. And then the alignment of the vertebrae has to be all straight. It's all got to be aligned, and just little adjustments, little subtle adjustments make a real difference among bodybuilders. They would say that you're stacking the vertebrae. It's all got to be stacked properly. Energy healers would say you have to open the flow, align the energy system. Because you see that in the energy arena, and I used to teach people how to work with it. You can feel it if you just can learn to feel with your hands. You can feel it in other people. You can feel when it's blocked or whatever. But that whole thing has to be aligned. Not just stacking vertebrae, so that's true to an extent. But that's another tangent. But more importantly, really, is that the energy flow has to go up, because that vertical dynamic links. It's the thing that connects all the different chakras and goes right out the crown. And so there's an energy flow that comes up through earth, grounds you into the earth, comes up through the body, enlivens all the chakras, lights the whole thing up, and then the whole thing becomes unified, becomes integrated. And that's where real power comes from, and comes right out of martial arts as well. But I didn't think any of that way in the beginning. I was just trying to do what, the instructions were to how to get a good sumo deadlift. And then it's working with it. It was an unfoldment, but I started realizing, that has to do with, rooting into the earth. It's an energetic thing. And everything that they're talking about from a physical perspective is a correlate on the energetic, which, I used to teach about that stuff for years. But when I started doing sumo, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just thinking about, stack the spine, that sort of a thing. At any rate, I did that. And then I started realizing different things about it. And I hope you're with me here, because this isn't just about sumo, this is about life. And before we're done with this podcast, you'll see what I'm saying. But at any rate, I started realizing that there's a process. And the first process starts with root. And it took a while for me to develop these terms and everything, and then I bounce them off of AI, and AI is great. Anyway, the first one is to root. What are you doing? You're rooting into the earth through your feet. And then the next thing you do is you align. All the vertebrae have to be stacked. The whole thing has to be aligned. You'll wind up knees bent. All the alignment has to be just right. And then after you align, then, and this is very interesting, then you open. Opening is just a more subtle term, more subtle form of alignment. In other words, when you do that, you get to a point where you feel the whole thing is super fluid. And bodybuilders, weightlifters, they'll talk that way. Power lifters, that the whole thing, it just seems to be no resistance. They're talking about the energy. They wouldn't use those words, but that's what they're talking about. From my understanding, from a deeper perspective, I'd have to say it that way, is that there's no obstruction to the flow of energy. You get to the point where you feel super fluid, and they will talk about that, the flow and the feeling that it is. And then, so after you open, and then you connect to the bar, when you do the deadlift, you're grabbing onto the weightlifting bar. And now you're open. And then what you do is after all that is lined up, after you feel the flow, after there's infinite flow, no resistance, alignment's perfect, everything's open, you can feel the flow, then what the lifters would say is drive, where you push with your feet. It's like you push the ground away, and then you move the legs up and the torso up. This is all stuff that evolved over time, because there's the pillar, I called it, go from the feet to the pelvis, and that's one side of the triangle. The spine and the back is another part of the triangle, and the bar with your arms it's a plumb line. It's not doing any lifting. It's just holding on to the bar and letting gravity determine the straight line when you go up. And so it's a triangle, this form, which I find interesting. Holy tradition, Rishidevata Chandas, you could get into all that if you wanted. But the thing is that when you do that, then even the lift itself, when you're doing this and you really have this, oh God, this is also beautiful. And we're getting to how it applies here real soon. But then the whole thing becomes super fluid. It just happens. It's like the weight of the bar becomes secondary, no matter how much weight is on it. And it can become significant, but nevertheless secondary. And so we have that thing: root, align, open, and action. And you try to do this in a way that applies to everything. And it also applies to the psyche. So getting away from sumo here. If you want to progress in life, even if it's a mental thing, you do the same thing. You root. What do you root into? Mother Earth, the transcendent, the absolute. That's the root. You see, it maps. And so then you root, you connect to it, and then you align with it. Now, what does that mean? Well, aligning with it, it involves a lot of how you think, how you feel, where you're blocking, where you're resisting. You find your alignment, and then you open, so it becomes like a natural flow, spontaneous right action, really. A spontaneous action that's in harmony with Mother Earth, the absolute, the transcendent, your own nature, the nature of your own physiology, Mother Nature as well, same thing. And then from there you act. And if anything in that chain from, rooting to aligning to opening to acting, if anything's interrupted or blocked there, it obstructs the whole flow. We get in our own way, in other words. We block our own ability to function in harmony with nature. Now, when we meditate, we tap into the transcendent, we tap into the absolute, we tap into that root. That's what proper meditation is all about. And in time, that just helps to dissolve and melt away obstructions and resistances. But on a pragmatic level, on a worldly level, on a relativistic level, there are things we can do, things we can look at. So doubts in the mind, you see, it's one thing to, I don't know what, go out and make $1 million. It's another thing to have your doubts get in your own way. And we're not talking about oblivion here. We're talking about a certain physiological function of the mind, where those doubts, those resistances, whatever, kind of block your progress. And again, it's not about, oh, okay, I'm going to do it, no holds barred, no, I have no doubt. But it's just talking about how doubt can creep in and obstruct our ability to root, to align, to flow, and to act. You see? Now, there's also the physical component. And this is really interesting. It's about the muscles and the muscles that permeate not just the skeletal muscles, the whole body. Bodybuilders are usually talking about skeletal muscles in this regard. So you see, use the skeletal muscles as an example. There's the tendon, and there's the muscle, and then the tendon inserts under the bone, right? But right where the muscle and the tendon meet, there's something called a Golgi organ. And I remember the word organ, organs are like stomach and spleens and the liver. But where that word came from, originally organ was like 150 years ago. They just used the word more freely. Now they would use another word, like nerve ending or something. But at any rate, they're called the Golgi, I want to say apparatus or something, but the word is organ, that's the word they use, Golgi. And what does this Golgi organ do? This Golgi organ is sort of like a protective thing, so that if there's too much strain, if there's too much force, you could say, to put an emotional word to it, the muscle gets afraid. The Golgi organ gets afraid and shuts the thing down. So all of a sudden, to use the weightlifting example, maybe before you were doing 180 pounds, but then if you push it too much, if you try to jump too far, oh, I did 180, let me try 200. All of a sudden, that's just too much. And what happens? The Golgi organ reacts and shuts down the muscle. And then you go back and you try to do 160 pounds and you can't do it. You see, that maps onto life too. Slow and steady wins the race, that kind of a thing. So there's a pace there, and it's like you almost have to, in one sense, you're tiptoeing past the Golgi organ. And in life, we do the same thing. I want to make $1 million, and so we push too fast, too hard. Not willing to do the incremental steps. In bodybuilding, what do? You don't jump from 160 to 180. You go in increments of, say, 10 pounds, 160, 170, 180, then you can do 190. And so what you're doing is you're tiptoeing. You don't want to freak out the Golgi organ. And see, that relates to the mind. I hope you can see that. It's a similar thing. Doubts kick in, blocks. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, it's too much. Oh, da-da. But if you just go incrementally, okay, well, I want to do this. And so first, maybe I need to, I don't know, go to college or I don't know what. So there's a process there. When the Golgi organs shut down, when they tell the body to shut down, it takes 48 to 72 hours for them to say, okay, everything's cool. I'm not going to shut down anymore, try it again. But a lot of times, just like in life, a lot of times in athletics, we try to push too hard. We want to, get that extra rep in or whatever. And so we push a little too hard, or we put a little too much weight on. And what that does, if you do that 2-3 times a week, that's it. You keep the Golgi organs shut down in perpetuity. You never get anywhere. And the same thing happens in life. Now, what's really interesting is that at one point I realized, and I talk about Dhanurveda, archery, the art of archery. I talked about that in a previous podcast. If you heard it, great. If not, will make it clear. It's not just archery, even though it's translated that way. It'd be interesting to look at this derivation of the word archery, the deeper meanings of archery in Sanskrit to a Sanskrit scholar, with a Sanskrit scholar. I could ask Panditji sometime, I'm sure he would know. It'd be an interesting conversation at any rate. But at any rate, I realized that root, well, that's earth. That's a Vedic term. It's fundamental to Dhanurveda. Dhanurveda is the art of archery. It's the art of action, really. It's the art of action in relative life. Okay? Transcend is another way of saying it. You root down into Mother Earth, the transcendental depth, the source of all existence. So you come from that place, how would we say it? Solidity within the self. Okay? And then what happens is you align. Now, commonly that's related to in Vedic, the spine, the Sushumna, Yiddish, Pingala, and Sushumna, that line that runs up the spine area, at the center of the body, and when it's all aligned and everything, all the chakras line up. Everything's integrated. You're functioning in harmony with nature. So that's right out of Dhanurveda. All this turns out, and to me, it was like, wow, light bulb going off. I just realized everything I've discovered here, and it's just Dhanurveda. And then the next is you open, and the heart is how they refer to it oftentimes, when they talk about archery. The heart has to be open. What are we talking about there? The flow. It's not just the alignment, all the movements, right, and stuff that has to come right from what they say is the heart, but the heart can mislead people. Oh, emotional heart. Oh, I have to feel. No, it's deeper than that. But nevertheless, what are we talking about? We're talking about the feeling, the natural flow through your body of the energy. You see, the heart, it's an energetic thing. That's why I call the chakras psycho-energetic centers. Okay? And so that channel opens. And then from there, you act, you move, you release, and the arrow flies. All this is pretty good in the notes that I wrote up, so you can check that out at michaelmamas.net if you'd like to see it written down. I think GTOs I have written down, that's Golgi tendon organs, okay? I hope that I conveyed it, because this is so important, and it's all about mastery of life, really. A lot of people think when you get enlightened, that's it. Okay, great, I'm enlightened. That's so far from the truth. Enlightenment means you didn't just touch into the absolutes, you awoke to it. The physiology, the depth of everything, the depth of your being, you're fully awake to it. We can get glimpses of that in meditation when we transcend. But when it really clicks in, it's something very different. But that's enlightenment. But then real alignment, now what we're talking about, leads to the direction of perfection. What do I mean by that? Immortality. Enlightenment is one stage, but so many levels. And Parashara's, in the Yoga Sutras, he talks about attributes of that. One problem with that is people say, oh, here's Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and here's what it's like to be, highly evolved or whatever. And so they start to try to mimic those things. There's very little value. I know somebody once was talking to me about Soham and the meditation of Soham, and that's just not it. Why? Because it's an overlay. And it's not a bad thing because it's an approximation. It points in a direction. You can work with it. But if you get caught up into a certain level of understanding, a certain level of interpretation of it, then it becomes an obstacle. You see, you're hanging on to your current level of understanding of it, that sort of a thing. It's also great. I hope I conveyed this, and I hope you appreciate just the beauty of it. Somebody was washing dishes the other day, and I was talking with them, and I talked about this a little bit, and they said, well, how does that relate to anything else? And I said, well, right now you're washing dishes. Let's use that as an example. What do you do when you wash dishes? You ground your feet into the ground. If you don't, then everything's unstable, you get tired, you get back pain, what have you. And then you align, the body. You got to get in good form, otherwise you'll get stiff muscles or what have you, tired out. Uh, and then you open, so that it just becomes a natural flow. And from there, the action is most efficient, and you can do a better job. It applies to everything. I don't care if you're a banker or an engineer or a tennis player or whatever, it's all right there. And it's Don or Dave. Scotty, I think that's it, unless you have something to add or questions or anything.
No, I was reading something from Maharshi the other day where he was talking about mantras and how they help kind of grease the rails of the physical world with um, absolute, and how that interplays with the whole thing too. So that if you had something maybe in the physical world that wasn't right, or the right mantras for you depend on what's not aligned or whatever, and those vibrations kind of help align things. Or maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, there's profound subtlety to the notion of mantras. There's this common thing where, oh, I see it in the book, and oh, here's a mantra, and isn't it beautiful? And so I'm going to use that mantra. Uh, that's a little bit like walking into a pharmacy and saying, well, it's all medicine, so I'm just going to take one of each, or I'm going to use this one because I like the pretty blue color or whatever. That's not the art of proper implementation of mantras. There are some universal mantras. The meditation that I teach, it's a universal mantra, good for everybody. Ram, Shri Ram, if you want to learn that one, go to Michael Mamas on YouTube, go to my homepage, and it comes right up. The first two, I think, postings there, how to do proper meditation, In my notes, I use the word mantra for root, align, open, and drive. That's an astral echo. That's an echo of the real deeper meaning of the word mantra. So let's not confuse that. Is that responsive, Scotty?
Sure.
Yeah. All right. I hope you think about this. A lot of my lectures, Scotty, was it you that came up with, or somebody came up with it? They say, listen to my lectures, it's like trying to drink out of a fire hose because there's so much information packed into a nutshell, And these podcasts are like that too. But I don't think it's about, spoon feeding, step one, step two. That just becomes an overlay anyway. This is enough. Reflect on this. See how it applies to your life. See where you block. See where, if you respond to an idea and your muscles tighten up and you block there, and then you hold from that perspective and try to think differently, you're not going to think differently. You're going to hang on to your current thinking. That relates to what we call identity, preconceived notions. Human evolution is a tricky thing because the mind tightens up, the muscles tighten up, one reinforces the other, convinces you that you're right, and you're living in a tiny little world, a little ecosystem, all of its own, it's consistent with itself, and nothing else. All right, good, Scotty? We good to go?
Yep.
All right, everybody. I love this podcast. I love the subject at any rate, and I hope you do too. Thanks for listening, and give us some thought if you would. We'll talk again next week.